Arthur, King of the Britons!
Not yet, actually. No, I can't get Excalibur out of this stone. Maybe you can help me, Gandalf.
And Merlin, you little bastable!
Sorry, it's just if I can't get this rusty sabre out of this boulder, I'll never be King of England. Maybe you can use some of your magic, Dumbledore.
Merlin! Look, kid, I can't make you the King of England, but I can make you a lord in Scotland, which the Scottish will tell you is better than being King of England any day.
Well, that sounds brilliant. What quest must I undertake? Will there be a dragon? Will it speak suspiciously good English?
No quest, just use established titles. You can buy as little as 1 square foot of land and officially become a lord in Scotland. Every title bought plants a tree to preserve this planet's woodlands. Yes, I foresee great destruction in these lands' future. I reckon all of this will be supermarket car parks. You might even be buried under one.
What?
Anyway, you even get a framed certificate to hang above your round table.
A certificate? Magnificent!
Now go to establishedtitles.com/Squire and use the coupon code Squire to get 10% off. Well, or I could magic you one up now, I suppose.
Wow! Finally! Now I'll get the respected court I deserve! And I'm supporting afforestation charities like One Tree Planted and Trees for the Future.
King Merlin, motherfucker!
It's January the 1st, 1936. Time itself seems to have stood still, as if it's waiting until everyone is ready. Then, almost at the press of a button, the chaos, confusion, and klaxons of daily life start. This is the arbitrary date which sets the world on the path to war.
You know, it's funny, I don't remember anything before 1936, but those were the good old days. Things were looking up. Amelia Earhart had just circumnavigated the globe, which at the time I said was quite the achievement. Sure, there was loads of stuff in the news coming out of China, but nobody knew if it was good or bad or somewhere in between.
Time really seemed to fly past in the 30s. Days had passed in what felt like seconds, but the years after that seemed to just drag on for ages. On and on and on and on and on.
People back then complained about how boring it all was. Peacetime, this is. I think they're expecting Germany to start a Second World War or something. Of course, that never happened.
Adolf Hitler, the would-be dictator of Germany, was removed from power after a vicious and accidental civil war was started in 1937, ousting him. The non-aligned party that came next promised peace and nothing exciting for years to come. Adolf Hitler, once thought to be a ruthless dictator in the making, becomes a footnote in history.
Adolf? No, not ringing any bells at all. I mean, I've got to say, if there was any trouble at all, it was here at home in Great Britain.
Well, you see, the common man was growing very bored. It didn't take long before right-wing groups were giving rousing speeches in the underground beer halls of Margate.
Then, the unthinkable happened. The British Union of Fascists started a full-blown military rebellion. This is the moment the English Civil War II began, much to the surprise of even the fascist leadership itself, which was shocked when the fighting started.
Well, I was only a humble shopkeeper, working for Pratt & Sons. But like everybody else, I saw the Civil War coming. It always happens, and it's always a mess.
Before the British Army can assign its generals, surprisingly well-armed fascist troops spring into action and cause chaos.
What you've got to understand is there were no lines because the lines hadn't been drawn. Really, it was about little sort of pockets of fascism springing up in towns and villages all over the place, willy-nilly.
Well, one day I was making toasters. Next day, get told by foreman we're converting into a tank factory. We reckon making tanks. And he rolled up. Turns out our factory's in one of them fascist areas they got. Suppose that meant I had to be 100% fascist from then on, which I committed to entirely.
I think the thing to understand is that these little pockets of fascist rebels were springing up all over the place. Norwich, Plymouth, Pontefract, but I think for Britain, really, the nail in the coffin was the defeat of Eighth Army at Torquay.
The fascists had won what would become known as the Battle of Britain, with the glorious leader proclaiming never had so much been gained by so few, at the expense of so many. But the British Empire wasn't out of the woods yet, as its colonies overseas began to break away after this sudden shift in national ideology. Claims that countries such as Canada would have been useful allies were quickly suppressed by the new regime. Thus, their importance was forgotten about completely in popular histories.
Canada?
Where's that, you say?
For now, the world seemed at peace, apart from that war Japan's doing in China that nobody cares about. Each government is too occupied with the daily stresses of massive armament, but something in England isn't right. And before anyone could act, the British Empire questioned Luxembourg's sovereignty in a move that shocked the world into silence.
At the time, I simply couldn't believe Luxembourg and their outrageous territorial claims. It was in the papers. They were posturing. We were in direct danger from the very start.
Now, most of us didn't know where that was, myself included, I don't mind telling you. But by the time the war started, it was too late to point out how Luxembourg was landlocked and uninvadable.
But the British Empire has a way in. They had the answer everybody was asking for. Invade France. The Supreme Leader declared war and gave a now infamous speech at a rally in the Houses of Truth.
We shall invade their country, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight them on their beaches and on their landing grounds. We shall fight in their fields and their streets. We shall fight them in their hills. They shall always surrender.
But the British know invading France means fighting the French Navy first. But the British admirals have a trick up their sleeves. As the French move to combine their fleets into a single mega flotilla in the Channel, they're caught off the Cape of Trafalgar, and nobody could predict what happened next.
Yes. They got completely fucked.
June the 6th, 1940. With the threat of the French Navy gone, Operation Underlord, better known as D-Day, is underway. The British begin their invasion of France, choosing to land the British Expeditionary Forces at the port city of Dunkirk.
I mean, as a historian, I'm frequently being asked what the D stands for in D-Day. I mean, to me, it's blindingly obvious. It's Dunkirk. Dunkirk Day, which, of course, was an utter, total shambles.
8 British divisions, headed by the elite 2nd Hong Kong Volunteer Defense Force, meet French troops. It's a nightmare scenario nobody saw coming. An opposed landing. It's a slaughter for the ages.
It was as if the entire thing was planned and put together in 2 weeks flat, and you could tell. I heard they were going to try a smaller raid first, at Dieppe, as practice, but didn't go through with it because they realized it was a shit plan, and they didn't have any Canadian troops to waste.
Then, only 3 days into the beach assault, the English attack grinds to a halt after losing over 50,000 troops. The unthinkable has just happened. They've run out of men.
Well, the Houses of Truth said the invasion was a brilliant success, but when we suddenly got a huge order at the factory for 50,000 new rifles, well, I'm not stupid, I'll put 2 and 2 together.
Of course, it's only then the government realized they weren't recruiting any new troops to replace the losses. They immediately changed the conscription laws to scrape the barrel, which is when I volunteered for the army.
After using a variety of civilian craft to land reinforcements at the Mole due to a lack of cargo ships, the British forces take Dunkirk. What they don't know is the French are mounting their own armored counterattack.
The British forces advance in the Pas de Calais and they meet the oncoming French forces, and this we now know of as the Second Battle of Agincourt. They end up meeting the French forces with S-35 cavalry tanks coming the other way, but they are moving into terrain that is actually very boggy, and they start getting channeled down into a narrow frontage. So whilst the French forces are actually outnumbering the British forces, the British have the Archer, and that takes a heavy toll on the French cavalry tanks. They become decimated, and they're worked on by the side by British forces as well, infiltrating some woodlands, coming up on the side of what is only could be described as slightly arrogant French tank tactics.
The French suffer a catastrophic defeat at Agincourt. This buys the English space to maneuver, and they soon gamble everything on a brand new battle tactic that would change the face of combat forever. Lightning War.
I think what you've got to appreciate is that on an operational level, Britain's primary objective was to capture Paris at any cost. So what they did was they charged a cavalry division that they'd forgotten they had straight at Paris, forcing an immediate French surrender, which is why it's called the 100 Hours War. It's a bit of a misnomer because actually it was 116 hours, 32 minutes, but let's not split hairs. It was a remarkable victory.
Anyway, it turned out the French had trained and equipped a whole new army, which could have saved Paris, but they forgot to deploy them. So that was it, the war was over. I went back to working at Patron, and everyone forgot about Luxembourg, which was strange, really.
Meanwhile, across the globe, the Soviet Union constructs 6 lines of defensive bunkers as they prepare for a German invasion that would never come. Joseph Stalin is desperate for something to happen, else what was all the horror for? However, the German Empire famously followed the Treaty of Versailles, limiting the allowable size of their standing army, which Britain quickly remembered and started justifying war goals. But how would Britain invade Germany?
British strategy is interesting. I mean, they decide that Belgium's out of the question. They accept that the Ardennes is impossible to tanks. And so they just decide to go hell-mel straight for the Siegfried Line, despite the fact that the Germans have completely reinforced the West Wall.
But the British have a new weapon. In a display that shocks the world, they're fielding a brand new heavy tank. A monstrous vehicle that would strike fear into the hearts of its enemies.
In the build-up to the invasion of Germany in 1941, Britain designs and builds a tank they call, rather unimaginatively, the Heavy Tank Mark I. And this is going to be a large, complex vehicle that actually has trouble being built. Initially, only about 1 a week can be made, and there's a lot of trouble at the factories because they're having to retool, they're having to learn how to build a tank on a scale that we're just not really used to in Britain. And that means there's delays in production, so in Operation Landlion, the actual invasion of Germany, they only see action in a limited capacity in the last week of the actual fighting.
The Lightning War grinds to a halt as the British Army waits on the Maginot Line for its new tanks to arrive. This period is known as the Phony War.
Also, diese englische Großpanzer, ja, sehr gut, aber Frühstücke Autobahn Abstunden.
Once the English heavy tanks had arrived, they broke through our defenses with ease. We had nothing to stop them with. I kept saying, we should have built tanks like this ourselves. They could have been so heavy. They'd have almost have been too heavy.
Though once again, Britain forgets to deploy the RAF until the invasion is basically over. They defeat the Germans by using the miracle that is
Blitzkrieg.
Lightning War.
With Germany now annexed, and fascist rebellions starting to take hold in former colonies, the sun truly never set on the British Empire. Mostly because the day-night cycle was turned off. But then, in a dramatic twist that shocks the world, Britain turned its eye to the United States of America. This excited the American people, because as per usual, they'd spent years doing absolutely nothing interesting. But before the war could even be declared, Japan said it had to go to bed. All powers agreed to resume the war next time. But next time never happens, does it?
So we done? Great. That was really good fun. Really good. Thank you. Yeah, these guys are an absolute joke. I don't know what the hell that was all about. I mean, they seem nice, but don't ever set me up with something like this again, okay? Yeah. Talk to you later. Bye.
We'd like to thank all of our wonderful Patreons for their support as always, and also this time our friends David Willey and James Holland for agreeing to risk their reputations and careers by appearing in this video. Check out the Tank Museum's YouTube channel where you can see David talk tanks, and then promptly go and listen to the We Have Ways of Making You Talk podcast to listen to James Holland chat great history with Al Murray. It's genuinely my favourite podcast, so go and do that. Also, buy James's recent book, Brothers in Arms. It's very good. Anyway, cheerio.